Chapter 9. Siobhan. Thursday. Okay, now, something very weird is going on. Either Biggles has suddenly developed prehensile abilities, which he's hiding from me, or else I'm going crazy. No matter how hard I rack my brains, I can't think of any logical explanation as to how he managed to get a handful of Go Cat out of a packet in a closed cupboard. It was fresh Go Cat too. I checked it to make sure that he hadn't perhaps previously ingested it and puked it back up again, but it wasn't remotely soggy. It still had that dusty feel to it, like when it comes out of the box. And I can't figure out how he was outside the house when I got back from the gym. I'm sure I left him asleep on the sofa. He must have scooted out with me, I suppose. And more strangely, I can't think how he could have climbed up on the kitchen counter, got a mug down, and left it there. It's got a big chip in the base, which definitely wasn't there before. The mug wasn't there before. I never go out without leaving the kitchen tidy, mostly because I don't want Biggles up there padding around leaving cat hair in my tableware, or worse, licking stuff. I know that cats are clean, I wouldn't have one if they weren't, but still, I don't like the idea of his paws all over my surfaces. What if he'd just been raking his litter tray? I assume I must have left the mug out, although how did I not notice that I'd chipped it? I don't like this feeling at all. I hate not being in control. It's like being on a fairground ride, when you can't tell them you want to get off. Oh God, please don't let this be the start of me losing my marbles. I couldn't bear it. I wonder if I should ask Paula what her thoughts on voluntary euthanasia are. I'll need someone to help me put a pillow over my face if it all gets that dire. I can't wait for Paula to get home. I'm dying to tell her about Phil and the dead flowers and the filthy postcard. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I've come to the conclusion that maybe it was Phil after all, some kind of macho screwed up way of proving his masculinity, or something. I don't even want to go there. I'm sure if I don't respond then he'll stop bothering. It must have really got to him, to go to the lengths of asking somebody to leave dead flowers on my doorstep even while he's in Portugal. What is it, some kind of special branch of Interflora? Maybe he used one of those prank agencies you see advertised in the backs of magazines, offering to carry out practical jokes for revenge. Wilted lilies for jilted willies. It almost makes sense. If it was just the postcard, I'd suspect Alex. After all, he did ask me out, and he put a pink ribbon around the review, but there's no way he'd leave dead flowers, is there? Unless he's angry with me for turning him down. But he didn't seem angry, or at all upset. And besides, like Brian, he's got no way of finding out my address. The college would never give it out, and McGowan is a pretty common surname. Monday. Paula's back. I rang her. Annoyingly, she was so jet-lagged that she couldn't understand what I was going on about when I tried to tell her about Phil, etc. She just wanted to talk to me about her holiday, which sounded exactly like the stuff of my worst nightmares, slumming it in those cheap and atrociously dodgy guest houses in Phuket, no toilet paper, mosquitoes in swarms, constant stomach upsets and the runs, and she calls that a holiday. It's my idea of complete hell. Still, she's only 24. She'll learn. Tuesday. Well, dementia is clearly encroaching fast. I got a package this morning, special delivery, a beautiful box with the most delicious underwear in it, a slinky dusky purple body with teeny little spaghetti straps and ivory lace, in the sort of silk that's so smooth it feels like it's not even there, resting like an invalid in layers of fat white tissue paper. But my delight at receiving such an exquisite package was ruined when I found the bill in the bottom of the box. £75, on my credit card. Lady Alzheimer is surely calling. I must have ordered it and then forgotten about it, or made some stupid blunder on the internet. I can't think how it happened. I suppose it must have been when I was browsing through those fashion websites ages ago, the ones whose addresses Paula wrote down for me. They do brilliant reductions on last season's stuff, from all sorts of different designers. I must have accidentally clicked on buy at some point. I don't understand how it works. Would they be able to tell my address from my credit card details? Maybe it's the same as that one-click thing I've got set up for when I buy books and CDs on BookJungle. I'll ask someone more au fait with these internet things, Dennis Tennis might know. I'll have to send it back. I can't afford 75 quid at the moment, not until I get some articles accepted. I've still got 4 out with editors who should all have got back to me by now, must chase them. It's so beautiful, I can't stop stroking it. The silk is so cool, and I can imagine how it would feel on my body. What a shame. I wish I was rich. But fortunately I seem to have ordered a size 10, and I can tell just by looking that it would be far too tight. It'd be up the crack of my ass in 2 seconds flat and I'd be uncomfortable all day, dying to hoik it out and not being able to unless in the privacy of my own home. Let's be pragmatic here, 10 minutes of that sort of torture and I wouldn't care how soft the bloody silk was. Wednesday night. Something horrible's just happened. I was walking home from the pub where Kathy and I had a drink after class, I'll write about that later, when I'm calmer. I'd cut across the swimming pool car park and was nearly at the far side, when suddenly I was sure I could hear footsteps behind me, secretive sly little steps. I glanced round, but there was nobody there. After what happened when I was 14, this is the one thing guaranteed to freak me out more than anything else. I instantly lost the ability to breathe properly, and started to kind of huff. I sped up, and just before I reached Colne Road, I am never going to walk across an empty car park at night again, I spun around a second time. This time I did see someone, a dark figure pressed up against the wall by the disabled parking spaces, trying not to let himself be seen. I started to run, flat out, trying to clutch my bag close to my side in case he was a mugger, trying to figure out how accessible my clothes were in case he was a rapist. I don't think I've ever run so fast in my life. I ran so hard that all I could hear was my footsteps banging on the pavement and my own panting, but just as I got to the gate, I turned round again and, oh God, he'd run after me. I saw him, I just didn't see his face, but I swear it was the same man, lurking again at the end of the road, watching me. He knows where I live. He knows where I live. He knows where I live. Who is he? I need to talk to someone. Tried Mum and Dad, and Paula, but they both had their answer phones on. M and D must be asleep, and Paula's probably out. It's only midnight, early for her. Better keep writing. Maybe I'll feel better if I get it all out, get the terror down onto paper, and then all it is little black letters and white spaces, nothing scary about that. I hurled myself inside the house, bolted the door, and ran around yanking every single set of curtains closed, making sure that the back door and all the windows were locked, shaking so much that I could barely get my fingers to work. Then I poured myself a huge gin and tried to sit down in the armchair, but I couldn't sit still, even when Biggles jumped on my lap and wanted stroking. I tipped him onto the floor and paced up and down, dizzy and fidgeting with fear. What did the man want? Was he outside the house now? Had he been after my bag, or worse? What if he tried to get in? I didn't know whether I should phone the police or not. I wished Phil wasn't in Portugal. I had a sudden urge to call Kathy, but of course I didn't. I've been sitting in my bedroom for ages, peering through a tiny slit at the side of the curtains, scanning the road until I got a draft in my eyes and I was beginning to imagine dark shapes behind every garden fence. But whoever it was has, I hope, long gone. It's late now, well past 2 o'clock, but I can't sleep, so I'm just going to keep writing. I've suddenly had a really appalling thought. What if this is all linked? What if someone's broken into my house and that's how come the mug was there and Biggles got out, and maybe somebody's got my credit card number, and maybe that's the same person that has just followed me home. It could be the same person who sent me flowers, not realizing they were dead. And wrote that card. Oh God, oh God. I've just run downstairs and checked the back door again. No sign of a break-in. Still locked and bolted top and bottom. Front door chained and chubbed. Window locks all still in place. It can't be that. It's impossible. I'm obviously just freaked out about that walk home. I'll have another drink. Had 3 big drinks. Bit pissed now. Keep writing. This would never have got to me so much if it weren't for what happened when I was 14. That time, when I looked around, he hadn't pressed himself against a wall and tried to hide. Instead, I'd seen him clearly under the streetlight, running at me. He was young and skinny, with wiry hair and tight jeans. He wore a cheap vinyl bomber jacket with a bobbled elasticated waist. Tonight, I hadn't even been able to tell if the man was black or white. That time, I'd felt two hands pounce heavily on my shoulders, the way people at school did to one another when they wanted to scare them. I jumped, and actually half laughed, trying to twist my head around again to get a better look at him. It must be someone I knew, I'd thought. I waited for him to release me and announce himself. Perhaps he was that fifth year who went to swimming club with Donna, the one Donna said fancied me. But he didn't speak, and I didn't recognize him. An arm snaked out and pinned my neck in an arm lock, so my head was forced back against his chest. I wasn't choking, because the crook of his elbow had left a breathing space in front of my Adam's apple, but I couldn't move either. "What are you doing?" I remembered trying to say. I remember how my voice was all small and spluttering. I could smell his breath in my ear, sour, heavy, more man than boy. I felt his other arm move in front of my body, his fingers searching for the opening of my duffel coat beneath the bottom toggle. His hand shot inside and clamped itself between my legs, under the bulk of my Laura Ashley dress and over my cream woolly tights. I remember exactly what I was wearing, that awful green flower-sprigged Laura Ashley smock thing. The tights were too small and had got dragged down a bit when I walked, and I felt his thumb brush against my bare stomach above the waistband, and it was the sensation of skin on skin which snapped me out of immobility. I'd tried to struggle, but he was holding me too tightly. His hand moved, a steel claw grabbing at me coldly, somehow dispassionately, and I felt pinioned, ready for dissection. It was almost like was scratching an itch for me, but too roughly. Without my permission. I made more of an effort to shake him off with my shoulders, flailing at him with my arms and hands. I managed to jam an elbow into his rib cage, and he gasped, but didn't let go. He was still clawing at me, mechanically, painfully, as if we were locked in a brief silent dance, a back-to-front waltz of lust and disbelief. I grabbed his wrist and tried to pull him off me, but his hand appeared to be superglued to my crotch. I tried stamping on his foot, which unbalanced him, and we toppled together towards the alley wall. I was in front of him and so I connected with it first. I felt a horrible scraping, ripping sensation down the right side of my face as the rough bricks grated my skin, and then a stinging heat followed by a trickle of blood down my cheek and into the neck of my duffel coat. Bloody hell. Where did that come from? I think I must have held my breath the entire time I typed that. It still stresses me out so much. I was 14, and 20 years later I still go to pieces if I even think someone's creeping up on me. And I'd been lucky, I got away. I wasn't even raped, just sexually assaulted, as the policewoman said, when I gave a statement. But at least my assailant didn't know where I lived. It's 4 o'clock. I must go to bed. I'm so tired and drunk now that I know I'll sleep. Thursday. Really knackered this morning. 2 rejection letters from editors. Well, at least that saved me the bother of chasing them. One said that the Botox thing had been done to death, and the other just that they aren't taking any work from freelancers at the moment. I wonder if I should bite the bullet and try and get a proper job somewhere. I could read manuscripts. I could maybe get a job for a literary agent. Although probably all the failed writers in the entire world, and Lord knows there are enough of us, think the same. Perhaps I could just run away somewhere remote, and hide. Me and Biggles. Safe where nobody can follow us or leave dead flowers. Friday. Have just realized I forgot to write about class on Wednesday night. I was too freaked out by what happened afterwards. It went well, I think. I'm really getting a good picture of their strengths and weaknesses. We did another sensory exercise and they were all much more attentive this week, now they know the drill. Not nearly so much fidgeting and scratching. Speaking of fidgeting and scratching, Brian wasn't there for the second week in a row. I feel somehow uneasy about his absence. I mean, I know it's not school and he's free to come and go as he pleases without a note from his mom, but what if he's too embarrassed to come in because it was him who sent that card? Anyway, Kathy read out another really excellent piece of writing. Last week's exercise was about the character and their reaction to noise, and she'd done a brilliantly funny thing about roadworks. Her descriptions were so vivid that I knew instantly where she was talking about. They've been digging up the road by the park for ages, so when we got chatting afterwards, I asked her if I was right. Turns out that I was, and she only lives a few streets away from me. We ended up walking home together, and just as we got to the George V, I mentioned what a great pub it was, and she said, "I know, it's my local. I live across the road here. Shall we, then? I'm parched." Before I knew it, we were inside the pub, looking around for an empty, non-sticky table, and draping our coats over the back of two spare armchairs. "It's funny," I said, feeling momentarily flustered, like I'd suddenly been asked out, but I've had to turn down 2 invitations out for drinks with other students, on the grounds that it's against college regulations. She laughed. She's pretty when she laughs, her eyes crinkle and her chin goes really pointy. I always feel so fascinated by lesbians. I instantly start wondering if they fancy me, and then feel affronted when they don't. I suppose that's how most men are, around pretty women. I like the idea of a lesbian experience, although I'm not sure I'd have the nerve to go through with it. Male students, I take it. Well, not difficult to guess which ones, since we only have the 2. I tried to bluff it out, pretending that I'd meant the students were from other classes I'd taught, and not this one. It would have been a bit indiscreet. But I'm sure she wasn't fooled. We got comfortable in the 2 big tatty armchairs near the fireplace with our drinks, vodka and tonic for me, Jack and Coke for her, and, just for something to talk about, I started telling her about the underwear delivery. I was laughing, saying how batty I've been lately, but she looked at me a bit strangely. "There's no way you could have bought that off the web without noticing," she said. "Well, I must have done. It's on my credit card. You would have to have typed in your address, approved the amount, entered your card details, and then the site would almost certainly have confirmed your purchase with an email afterwards. They do that to stop fraud." "Then how?" She shook her head. "I've got no idea. Unless you really are losing your marbles." "Yeah, thanks Kathy." I sighed, tempted for a moment to pour out my heart about all the other weird things which had happened over the past 2 weeks, but instead we drifted into a conversation about writing, and then publishing. Kathy used to have an agent, but the agent dropped her after failing to find a publisher for her first novel, so we had a lot in common. I told her about the TLA fiasco, and she sympathized, which made me feel worse. There was a time when people were impressed that you'd been published, not sympathetic. I can't stand being a has-been. I was about to say goodbye and go, when Kathy got up. Her legs in jeans were inches away from me, and I suddenly wondered what she'd do if I pressed my face into her. She has nice legs, like a Barbie doll's. All the men in the pub looked at her when she stood up. Another drink. I checked the time on my phone, 10:30, although my decision wasn't time-dependent, since I'd already decided I wanted to go home. Better not. I'm a bit wrecked, to tell you the truth. Want a lift? My car's just across the road. It wouldn't be a problem. I laughed, how ironic, in retrospect. Why did I not just accept? No, it's fine, thanks. It'll only take me 5 minutes to walk. There was a moment's awkward hovering at the door of the pub. I didn't know whether to shake her hand, or kiss her cheek, and it seemed that nor did she. In the end we grinned at each other and waved self-consciously. "See you next Wednesday, then." "Yeah. Thanks for the drink, neighbor. Bye." Kathy vanished round the corner, pulling on her coat and simultaneously fishing around in the pocket for her keys as she walked. She strikes me as a multitasking kind of person. I wondered if, once the course was over, we could be friends and decided that it was quite possible. It would be nice to have a mate, I nearly said, girlfriend, living locally, none of my other friends do. Then I began to walk home, across the swimming pool car park, and that's when I got chased. Oh God, what if it is the same person who sent the card, and the flowers, and the underwear? That means he's been in my house. What do I do? Should I tell the police? Have I got a stalker? I don't know whether to be embarrassed or flattered. I know for sure I'd be terrified, if I really believed I had. No. It's just not possible.